I'm making sense of like who I was and who I've become. The word here is identity shift. And I feel that like going through this identity shift might take years. For me, I'm still going through it, from being this like nomad, cosmopolitan, cool chick, like who lived all over the world, to becoming a grounded mother in New Jersey. And it's a very big shock for me. That, if anything, is my biggest cultural shock. But at the same time, I'm living for my biggest purpose in life yet. And I chose this. I love having Lucas just running around and causing chaos and havoc as we have this podcast. And everything I do more than ever is for the future generations now. It's for him, it's for Noah, and it makes me work more efficiently. It makes me smarter. So it's tough, but I really respect parents now more than ever.
My guest today is Lais de Oliveira, a community builder, business strategist, writer, entrepreneur, and a mom. She has lived in 7 countries, speaks 5 languages, and has spent over 15 years designing and facilitating community-led journeys for personal and professional growth. Since 2018, through her consultancy and writing her book, Hacking Communities, she has helped mission-driven organizations shape brand narratives, design scalable systems, and build communities with heart and clarity. In this episode, we talk about how she transformed her love for creative writing, storytelling, and personal branding after becoming a mom. And we also talk about the friction of moving constantly from country to country, to being a mother in the American suburbs, the underdog complex of being from Latin America when living in the US, and why she believes the most powerful thing you can build isn't a company, but a life fueled by human connection and community. I learned a lot from Lais, and I think you will as well. Enjoy the episode.
All right, Lais, thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to talk to you. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Well, I told you, I have a toddler and a baby with me in the house as we speak because life happens and the school heater is broken and my baby is 4 months old and breastfed. So we're just hoping that maybe both of them make an appearance today. But I'm doing good. Thank you for asking and thank you for having me.
Good. We're going to welcome them with open arms when they show up.
Thank you.
How would you describe yourself, Lais, to someone who doesn't know you?
Oh, that has changed so much in the past 3 years, and I have been pretty much trying to figure that out. But I'll describe myself as a person in movement, as a mother, as a woman in transition almost permanently, a traveler, curious-minded entrepreneur. And I say entrepreneur only because I like creating things that don't exist in the world. I could also maybe call myself an artist. I like creating things. But yeah, I think a mother sums it up really well.
Yeah. How old are your kids now, by the way?
Lucas is a boy, almost 3. He's turning 3 in 2 months. And Noah, she is 4 months and a half. And it's a girl.
Yep. Little baby. I usually start with this question. What's one belief from your culture that has helped you in your life and that you still apply today?
I think the deepest core belief I have, you're making me think of it now, but I believe it is trusting people and giving people the benefit of doubt, thinking ultimately people are good and not ill-meaning in any ways. I feel that I come from a culture where we have learned to respect neighbors and strangers and need them. And I remember even in situations where I was borderline bullied at school, or like there was a kid who was mean, my mother and my father always taught me to see their side. And at moments it felt hard sometimes, more than as an adult than as a child. Sometimes I just wished they would just be unconditionally on my side for everything. But there's a thing about being from Brazil where we're somehow curious about the others and curious about their intentions. And it's more beneficial to give people the benefit of doubt than to judge people based on their actions or first impressions. So that's something I feel I carry with me. Even if after moving out, that has been challenged, that belief, I've learned to distrust people sometimes, but I feel that I carry that willingness to trust people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I didn't know that that was something that Brazilians share, that giving the benefit of the doubt in general.
I think this is more my family. I don't want to risk saying this is a general Brazilian thing. If I want to give you a double answer, I think what I do bring from Brazil is the not taking good things for granted. I come from a culture where borderline scarcity permeated my existence, my
Hmm.
early childhood. From very young age I was like facing contrasts. Like I would go to a public school where kids had never heard of Disney. And I would go then to the conservatory to learn music. It was a state conservatory, so it was free, but it was still the kids who could afford being there were more privileged. Our parents had the time to give us that opportunity, for example, and to afford instruments. Like when I was there, I would be able to talk about some topics that I could not be talking about with other kids. So I think I've learned to juggle that. But what I'm trying to get to is like, I've learned how to find the joy in the smallest things. I learned how to not take privilege for granted in a way. And
Hmm.
I've learned to be able to just navigate circumstances and be grateful for life, no matter how small you feel your life is. I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but I
You
feel that
are.
like
Yeah, yeah.
the joy for life that Brazilians and I think many people from emerging countries share of like, we might not have much, but we have ourselves and we have life and we're having joy for small things in a nutshell.
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very Latin America. I'm in Mexico right now, actually, and the
Nice.
minute I stepped out of the plane, I feel that that feel that in general for smaller things. I wanna understand what was the but no moment. Maybe it was a transition of when did you started thinking to leave Brazil for the first
Mm.
time and why? What was your main motivation to do that?
So I want to start by saying that while my family and background is not like I didn't have wealthy parents nor anything, in the context of Brazil, I want to say I was privileged with information and education. And I had always been a very, very curious kid. I think all kids are. But I remember, for instance, being very bored at school. I'm from a very small town. I grew up, my mom, think about it, was raised in a farm. She was the first of 11 to be born in a hospital. And my father also was raised in a very small town. I come from families that were raised in very rural conditions, situate contexts. So I wouldn't think of living abroad only based on that, but my parents were always very curious. My mom as a teenager and my dad as a teenager went both to live in the capital cities of their states. And that gave them a lot of, I want to say, a mindset that raised me thinking being very open-minded in a
Hmm.
context of very, very like a very provincial context. So think about that very curious child who never had the opportunity to go abroad. It was unimaginable growing up in the 90s in Brazil to go abroad within my range, economic range. It was something for the very wealthy in the 90s in Brazil. And I remember the first time I saw Americans, I think they were Americans. I actually think they were Mormons, like evangelizing because they were wearing like suits and they were like two white guys pretty much speaking a different language. That made me very curious. I always loved different languages and I felt very attracted to it. When I was 12, I started studying English as my brother did, as many kids my age did. And I wanted to live abroad, and I had a cousin who went to live abroad. So I started getting in touch of like, there is life outside of Brazil. And the fun fact is, my mother used to be a subscriber to National Geographic, and I was obsessed with the covers. And I didn't know what I was talking about, but there would be Japan, China, people from Southeast Asia in the covers, and I always felt very attracted and curious for anything outside of my culture.
Hmm.
And as soon as I had an opportunity, my family couldn't afford me going on an exchange like when I was in high school. But I did participate in a project where I went to Portugal when I was 16. And from there onwards, I've always wanted to live abroad. And it was all driven not by scarcity, not because I had to live a better life, but by curiosity. The first country I lived in was Mauritius in Africa. Then I moved to Argentina, then Chile, then Malaysia. What I'm trying to say
Yeah.
is that my first passion and my main passion still are emerging countries. And I like just the sultry, the rich, the colorful, the spiciness of cultures. And I've always been attracted to that. I wanted to study anthropology. I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to work in like, international law. I've always cared about like the world and I saw it as my home from a very early age, even though I was not
Yeah.
raised in a context where that was possible.
Well, yes, absolutely. And why Mauritius was the first country?
So, as part of my desire to live abroad, as soon as I could afford it, I was living in a small-ish town in Minas Gerais, Brazil. And I had this very good university I could have gone to, but I wanted to study in a bigger town. I was not looking for the best college as much as I was looking for the best environment for me to grow culturally. So I went to study in Belo Horizonte, 9 hours away from my parents. And in my first year of all things law school, I
Hmm.
joined an NGO called ISAC. And I started as a volunteer. And within 2 years, I had become a local director of like HR, talent management for that NGO, all student run, with a focus on enabling people like me to have rich, real life experiences of leadership and
Hmm.
living abroad. And through that NGO, there was an opportunity to join the chapter of Mauritius to help them expand into new universities. So I took that chance. As soon as I saw it, I applied. I liked the opportunity. I liked the idea of being in an island that was mostly consumed by tourists, but being there as someone who would help create and add value, not consume. And that was legitimately my motivation. I wanted to be in a touristic place
Yeah.
working for an NGO. And it was the most amazing experience I could have had. It was the first and the richest international experience that I've had. Before I had done a project, as I said, in Portugal, but that was like a 15-day trip. This one was
Hmm.
3 months living in Mauritius, taking buses,
Mm.
going to colleges, speaking with students, opening 3 chapters of ISAC in Mauritius. And I
Yeah.
wanted to live there. I wanted to stay and study law and change my law degree to Mauritius. And my
Hmm.
mom talked me out of it. And right
Mm.
after that, way of negotiating it out was that I moved to Argentina. But that's another story.
Yeah, that was where I was gonna go next. Like, what made you keep keep moving? And because you Argentina, Chile, Malaysia, Portugal, and now the U.S. And we don't have to
Yeah.
touch on each, but what was the main
I think
motivation?
in retrospect, I've always wanted to live the highest learning experiences I could. I've always was
Hmm.
very oriented towards experiences. And like I'm a writer at heart and I tell stories. And the way I tell stories is more like stream of consciousness. Deep down, this is very deep. But I always wanted to be the character that I would write about one day. I wanted to live
Mm.
enough life experiences instead of just imagining things on my mind. I was very attracted to things that would enable me to live those peak experiences. So I got the opportunity to become the VP of talent management at this very NGO for Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay.
Hmm.
Because usually there would be national chapters, but in that case, we had merged 3 chapters in one for financial reasons. And I felt, when in my life am I going to have the opportunity to become like the VP and lead 2,000 volunteers across 3 different cultures in Latin America in my life? So I jumped on it and they elected me the VP talent management. And a year later, I wasn't going to apply for presidentship because the terms were 1 year only, but I didn't like the candidates, my colleagues who were applying. I didn't feel they had the right reason or the right motivations to become the president of the NGO in Southern Cone, Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay. So I applied as a president. And that meant if I was elected, I would drop out of school. I would drop out of college, to the terror of my parents, because I had been approved for this very, very good college in Brazil, like the top
Mm.
3 law school in Brazil. Anyway, I got elected as a president, and then I had to
No.
drop out of college. And that my life kept going this way. My decision making was always based on what decision, what experience is going to yield the biggest real life experiences to me. Becoming a lawyer in Brazil or leading this NGO as a president for a year and managing a board of presidents of 20 local directors, managing a board of executives with like 8 people in my team who are all older than me. I was 21, they were all
Yeah.
28, 25. Anyway, the bottom line is I always wanted to learn through real life. And that led me to drop out of college 2 other times from that point. I tried to study anthropology in Buenos Aires, it didn't work. I tried to study like business, like from like remotely before even remote studies were like popular, and that didn't work. Then I moved to Malaysia again based on the same thing. I wanted to live real life experience. I got an opportunity in Malaysia, moved to Malaysia, and the rest is history. So I feel that curiosity has always been my guiding light.
And then you were having this
Yeah.
role, so that's amazing.
It was borderline traumatic, if I want to tell you the truth. And my team today is still very tight. We have a WhatsApp group where we still chat every day, and
Mm.
I'm still friends with the people who are part of it. But I was dealing with real political like fights and conflict and
Yeah.
having to manage the interests of, imagine, 20 local presidents with their own interests, and my team were all internationals. I had someone from Austria, US, Chile, Argentina, Brazil. The bottom line, it was very hard, more than my 21-year-old self could understand.
Right.
And now going back in time, I was like, that was impressive, but it was also
Yeah.
very stressful. I was very burnt out at the end of it. And I have a lot of kindness for myself because I thought back then, besides having succeeded in everything, I thought I could have done better. I was a very, very like hard on myself kid, very A type.
Mhm.
So today I give myself a lot of grace. It was a wonderful experience. And the fact my team still tight together is very meaningful to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I wanna talk about Malaysia because I know this is where you shift your careers to communities, right?
Yeah, I want to say that I was unaware, unconsciously working in community building for my entire life since I started working for that NGO in 2007. But
Mhm.
in Malaysia, 7 years later, I became aware that the way I operate is called community building. Became aware of community as a department, as a science, as a field in itself. Before that, I thought I was a mix of talent management, marketing, operations, sales, everything, like product. Today, I
Mhm.
understand more that the all-encompassing way to explain how I operate is community. And Malaysia gave me that knowledge, but that's what I had been doing before.
Why did Malaysia give you that knowledge? What does that
So
mean?
I landed in Malaysia so first of all, I was living in Argentina and applied for a job online because as everything went, I wanted to live abroad in Malaysia, abroad. I was already living in Argentina, but I wanted to live that experience in Southeast Asia for 1 year. So I applied for a job and I got in. And long story, it actually took me 8 months to get my visa approved for Malaysia for some weird reasons. But the bottom line is that I landed there to work for that job. And within 3 months, the company I had gone to work for was not what I thought it would be. Big time of what motivated me to go to Malaysia and experience working for that company was their organizational culture. I was
Mhm.
very passionate about organizational culture as a way to help people becoming the best version, the fullest version of themselves, which is my approach to community, by the way. Community building for me is about creating contexts where people can thrive. And before I knew community as a department, I thought that was organizational culture. So that's why I was very inclined to those topics and I wanted to work for that company. When I got there, I found that their culture was not what I expected, and it works well for some people, but for me, it came across as a very scarcity minded environment where the CEO was borderline authoritarian. And it may have been just a phase when I was there, like a tough phase for the company, but that was my experience. So after 3 months, I was not happy at that company, but I had been organizing events for founders outside of it.
Mm.
And my events had been growing. I had an event, my first event, I was interviewing local founders on behalf of Startup Grind, which is a global community of
Mhm.
startups and aspiring entrepreneurs and founders. I had already ran successfully their chapter in Buenos Aires. So when I moved to Malaysia, the first thing I did was to start the Kuala Lumpur chapter of Startup Grind. And within a month or 3, I had 60 people in my first event, 70 in my second event, 250 people attended my third event.
Wow.
And
Yep.
the people from Startup Grind headquarters said, why don't you quit this job and come work for us?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I became the global director of expansion for Startup Grind, representing Africa and Asia Pacific. And I helped expand Startup Grind into 80 chapters in that region. Even to me, at that time, I was like, 80 is not enough. I thought it was a very low number. But now I think, oh, wow, 80 chapters, like in a
Yeah.
short stint of like a year and a half across like working remotely from Malaysia, just like bulldozing. And I also helped them like revamp their processes to reach to 500 chapters instead of like growing at the scale we were growing at, which was very slow at the time, very
Mhm.
handcrafted. The bottom line is that I was doing all that. And within 6 months of living in Asia, I got invited to join the government of Malaysia as a consultant. And
Yeah.
I remember that they took me out to have lunch on this like big city called Putrajaya they have created for like to build like a tech park in Malaysia
Mhm.
just outside of KL. And they were building this initiative called Malaysian Global Innovation and Creativity Center out of Cyberjaya, which was the name of their like tech city. They
Mhm.
had an initiative. This initiative was funded by 20 million US dollars. It had been launched by Obama, like this very big deal. And they had brought in a woman founder, entrepreneur who had sold her business in the US to Walmart to become the CEO. I
Oh,
met
wow.
her and she
Mhm.
hired me to become the community development consultant to establish partnerships with grassroots community builders and help
Yeah.
spread the word and create a culture and a mindset of entrepreneurship in Malaysia, which traditionally is very risk averse. So my job was to help with all initiatives at Magic, change the mindset into a more entrepreneurial mindset for the entire country. And your question was, how did I find out I was a community builder? Visiting, I was part of like them pretty much selling the idea of working for the government. They took me on a tour and then of Cyberjaya, Putrajaya, and during lunch, the government representatives who were trying to convince me to work with them were like,
Mm-hmm.
we need more community builders like you. And I didn't say like, you need what? I just heard that term. I felt it was like important. Sounded like
Yeah.
they were.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, sure, community builders. Yeah, I'm a community builder. That's what I am, a community builder. And then I was just like processing
Yeah.
that term as I heard it. Next thing I was working for the government while still working for Startup Grind. And a year and a half later, I was starting my first business, which was very related to my community work. And 2 years later, I was doing placemaking projects with another partner, like building a city in the south of Malaysia at the border with Singapore. It was just a crazy, very, very crazy serendipitous journey where I went from being someone who was trying to figure out myself to flourishing in a field that I didn't even know exists and being part of creating that field, which is now known, widely called as community building, community development, community organizing. And by the way, it has always existed in a way, but I feel I was part of a generation that was creating terminology that was accessible for everybody. And part of
Yeah.
it was writing my book. I wrote Hacking Communities with the interest of making those terms that what I found is that while I was meeting community builders all over the world, many of them who did not call themselves a community builder, but we had the same practices, the same mindset. So my goal was to help create knowledge, help create language to name what we did. And because I found out when someone named it for me, I flourished. So I wanted to help others name what they were doing. That's why I wrote my book. And I could write another one again, and I should, because this knowledge is this is a living science. Community building is always changing
Absolutely.
and it has always existed. I'm not part of a group that is creating it from scratch. It has always existed. We're just making it more modern, I would say, more updated.
Right. And I don't think it's that well known, like you're mentioning. I honestly haven't heard of a lot of people or other books like yours. And you started the book process also in Malaysia when you were there?
It's funny because I have been revising my notes in my first year in Kuala Lumpur after like 3 months of that crazy serendipity I described to you just now, of like meeting people and suddenly quitting that job and becoming head of community for Startup Grind, etc. I wrote on my notes app Hacking Communities. I wanted to write an article about how that serendipity happened, but then I felt it's too early. I was very humbled by the fact that I had just got here. This is all too crazy. I don't know if this is gonna sustain, but I just want to tell the story of how this happened, but let's wait a minute. 4 years passed and it kept getting crazier until I found and sold my first business. I did this crazy projects as I talked about, city building at the border with Singapore. I kept working for the Malaysian government. It just kept getting more interesting. And in 2017, I had a more personal experience during a pilgrimage. I don't know if you've heard of El Camino, Santiago de Compostela. I've done it with my mom. And I had a revelation that for very personal reasons, I wanted to move out of Malaysia, which was very hard for me. And at the time I was leaving Malaysia, I said, now I should write the book. And I will write that book as sort of like a closing chapter for my time in Malaysia. So it took me actually 2 years to write that book. After Malaysia, I moved to San Francisco and I kept writing it. I worked for Startup Genome, which collects data on why startup ecosystems thrive, which helped me a ton in like grounding my knowledge into very practical strategies, also thinking of like doing what I had done on the groundwork for Malaysia, but bringing data from other ecosystems into it, adding more to my knowledge. So I added elements from my experience in San Francisco at Startup Genome to the book, but most of Hacking Communities is profoundly based on my experience in Malaysia. That 25, 28, 29-year-old living in Malaysia, trying to figure herself out and discovering herself as a community builder and discovering community building as a sort of new field or science. That's the author of Hacking Communities, which is why 10 years later, I should write another book. I feel that right now I have a woman who lives in New Jersey and is married and has 2 kids and has different struggles, but I have newfound meaning for community. And since then, I've worked for other projects more focused on scaling communities from a product perspective and from a business value creation, community as an engine for customer success. I could write another book as of now, more focused on community architecture, because
Yeah.
hacking communities has the seed for thriving communities. I still live by it. I still read
Hmm.
it sometimes myself to remind myself of like, why am I doing this? It's very values driven, purpose driven. It's like the why and a little bit of the how. It has part
Yeah.
one and part two. I could rewrite part two into a more deep narrative, into a more how to strategies, tactics. But hacking community still stands as like the why, the
Oh,
principles.
yeah.
And I like that.
Yes. And you talk a lot about how you build communities in Malaysia. I want to understand a bit more of how that changed in the US
Yes.
specifically. Like how, especially because we talked before about how you felt as a Brazilian woman in the US. That was way more, some experiences were more notorious in a way that
Yeah.
I'm Brazilian here, which is something that I didn't felt in other countries, maybe.
It's funny. I feel like I was thinking about this right before our call as I was putting my daughter to sleep, because it is a fact that in the things that I always moved abroad without thinking I'm Brazilian. I always moved abroad as a person
Mhm.
who's curious about the world. And I do want to say I feel myself like as a very cosmopolitan person. I tend to adapt and to become the culture I'm immersed in. I like that. I like being a little bit of a chameleon because I like absorbing. And even when I lived in Argentina, I had some friends who would be like constantly talking about their countries, like, oh, but in my country.
Yeah.
And in my mind, that was the part of me that was maybe mildly impatient and intolerant. But in my mind, I was like, go back to your country, in that sense of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
if you're here. So I've always
Mm.
liked absorbing cultures, and that always made me not think I'm Brazilian. And when I lived in Argentina, when I lived in Chile, Mauritius, Malaysia, not only I was like accepted as a person and not questioned based on my nationality, I was welcomed with curiosity. There is something about emerging cultures, and Brazil is the same, where when you see a foreign, generally curious about them, you generally
Mhm.
think they have something to contribute to you. It's funny because after so many years being colonized, you think the opposite. But I feel that just makes us there is a dark side of that. I don't know if you've heard of like the underdog culture in Brazil, in Malaysia. We generally think that anything foreign is better. So there's an element of that, unfortunately, where I was reading about the other day. We have in Brazil we call it like cultura de vira-lata, which is like
Mhm.
stray dog culture. We always think that like anything European or American is better deep down. But I'm not coming when there's that complex of inferiority, but what I'm talking about here is more positive, is more curiosity. Like what I found in emerging countries, Argentina, Malaysia, people were curious about me. And they
Mhm.
did not take me for granted for like being from Brazil. In fact, they didn't know what to make of me because I didn't match their idea of Brazilian that is sold on media. They would think of very tall girl, very like model looking, and I'm
Right.
not tall. So I just broke their, how can I say, standards,
Yeah.
expectations,
Mhm.
but
Very
I just
much.
made them open. And it's funny because I was hanging out with friends here in New Jersey yesterday, and my friends' parents asked me about Malaysia and how women are treated there like poorly, because that's their American perception of it. And the fact is, I do not remember ever. Well, there were shitty situations in the tech world, which was more due to the honestly American culture in venture capital. So I
Mhm.
had bad things happening to me as a woman in Malaysia. Don't get me wrong. But it was not due to Malaysian culture. If anything, I was telling them, it's funny how many times Americans have ideas of other countries being more quote unquote underdeveloped culture. And my experience, albeit I'm saying it's my experience, tinted by my perspective, and I'm definitely privileged in many ways, and I'm definitely surrounded by people who might as well be privileged. But in my context of like starting companies in Malaysia, more often than not, I felt respected. I felt heard. When I looked at other Malaysian founders, I think Malaysian women are very strong to the point there is an element of matriarchal culture in Malaysia, which I find also resonant with Mexico and Brazil. There's a
Mhm.
layer of respect to women and what they have to say when they're founders that I told them I actually find it missing in the US. If I'm honest with you, I have never been so taken for granted or dismissed in a meeting as I have been immersed in the startup culture from like San Francisco. So there's an idea that I feel that like that's not your question, but I'm just getting to the point of like, I feel there is a difference between in the US, there is an idea about the foreigner, as in like, in general, they come to you not with curiosity, but with assumptions.
Right.
And they're not bad people. They think of like, you're from Latin America. And for the first time, I never ever noticed this. And it took me 2 years in the US to notice that they are underestimating me. I never knew how that felt. I've always
Yep.
been used to being in a country where people would hear me first and judge me from there. And given that I've always been very prone to contributing, people would give me a chance. I got hired to join the Malaysian government within 6 months, and I did a good job. I kept working for them for 3 years, and my life kept building up. In the US, more in any other country I've lived in, I don't feel that not only I have to prove myself, I have to change their mindset about me. Not only as a woman, but also as a Latin American person. I never knew how that felt. So it was like something I couldn't name for 2 years. And that happens with the best people who are just unaware. I think there's just an idea, generalized idea of like, many times the way Americans talk about me, about my culture with me, is like telling me everything they know. Like when you go to Malaysia, you say, hi, I'm from
Yeah.
Brazil. "Oh, what language do you speak?" Versus more often than not. And
Right.
people who are from Latin America, especially Brazilians, who find it funny. I'm from Brazil. They're like, oh, muchas gracias. I speak Portuguese. And I think it comes from maybe a good place of trying to relate. But I feel more often than not, building, like, becoming part of the US is more like people come with a lot of assumptions about you. And you have to deconstruct that. And
Yeah.
that sometimes can be negative. And it's not with everybody. Of course, there are pools of people in the US who are extremely open minded. But I'm talking about more generalized experience I've had here and not anywhere else. I find that here sometimes people struggle more to understand where I'm from because they don't ask. More often than not, they're more assuming things about me than letting me show who I am. They have preconceived ideas about Brazilian women, etc. Once again, it's not everybody, but it's a hard topic to talk about. I don't know if sound like I'm offending anyone. I think American
No.
culture is brilliant. I think that they've had a very good impact in the world. But I do find that in the sense of like being heard as a woman and being heard as an immigrant, more often than not, there's a sort of like accent discrimination.
Yes.
And
Yes,
I've never
absolutely.
experienced that anywhere else.
Me neither. And I don't think people talk about it enough, again, because we're trying to fit in constantly and fight the bias and being angry about it, but it's lack of curiosity, which doesn't make them bad people either. And it like you said, there's great people in the US that still have those tendencies, and it's just,
And
I don't
sometimes
know.
I feel that, like, you've asked me in the beginning of this podcast about my career and experience, and I've lived abroad, and it's even hard for me to, like, be a Brazilian right now. If I go back home, I don't feel at home with my family anymore. I love them, and I am at home with them for 2.5 weeks, for a month. But I need to find people in Brazil who are cosmopolitans. When I go to Malaysia, I make it a case. I had like many local friends. I learned Malay, Indonesian. I love learning languages. I love becoming part of the culture I'm immersed in. That being said, I am still Brazilian and I'm an expat. Most of my friends in Malaysia were also the cosmopolitan minded people, the expats. So, in a way, I got to be gracious to the fact that now I'm living in New Jersey with many people who never left a 500-mile radius of this area.
Mhm.
And if their parents came from a different state, that's the most international experience they've had. And my son is using a permanent market on my table. Can you use a different one, buddy? Can you use this one? So, I'm sorry, reminding. Okay, thank you. So I become very cosmopolitan to the point that it's hard for me to become, like, to explain myself. So, and I generally want to say that, like, I've been hard on most Americans who never left their radius if I'm expecting them to understand me, because not even I understand me fully. I am a part of too many mixed cultures right now.
Yeah.
I lived almost 5 years in Argentina, almost 5 years in Malaysia, 3 months in Mauritius, 2 months in Indonesia. I've lived like too many places to be only one thing. But what I'm talking about is that sometimes having that world lived experience, I feel like it's hard to find a metaphor to explain this, but it's almost as if like I am a very, very, very virtuoso musician. I play like the flute like no one does, but I'm playing the flute to people who are like not interested in music at all, or who can only hear the drum.
Yes.
I
Right.
don't know what to explain. It's a very poor metaphor. I'm trying to find a better way.
No. It's on point. Really.
But I feel like sometimes, like, what matters here that I speak Malaysian, Indonesian, French, Spanish, English, and Portuguese. If they only speak English, and it's not that they only speak English. It's like it's not that I'm trying to also like sell my curriculum by saying, oh, I can do all these things. It's more about real like listening and being curious and being open to people's lived experiences versus just where they are from. I feel that when I'm trying to show myself often in the American context, they see their knowledge of me sometimes stops at my accent. And they will never know that I wrote a book. They'll
Yeah.
never know that I speak 7 languages. They'll never know that like I have a kid that I love and that I'm juggling a toddler and a baby and starting a business. And I feel sad for people who never even ask.
Right. Absolutely. Same.
And I'm craving
here.
community constantly, and I currently build community because I'm looking for the weird ones. And my husband is American, and he's a very curious person. Here's the thing: my husband is American, my in-laws are American. They're curious. They are they are good ones. There's a lot of good ones out there, and I feel that like it's very discriminating as well to talk about Americans in a generalized way. And once again, I feel that I come to a point in life where I'm talking about people who are maybe provincial minded. And there's a lot of provincial minded people in my current surroundings. That being said, they're not bad people. I love them, but they will never know who I am.
I want to talk about being a mother and all of the things that you're juggling right now. And at the same time, building community and finding those people that you're talking about. How do you do it, Lice? How do you do it all?
I don't. I feel that I'm
Yeah.
failing 80% of the time. I'm learning as I go. I feel there's a lot of women who I'm trying to learn from who actually do it all. So it's always a game of like, you're building, like in startup world, we say I'm building an airplane as I fly. It has never been so real for me as of now. I really don't perceive I'm doing it all. I am trying to spend time with my kids. I'm trying to find childcare solutions that I feel proud and safe and at peace with, while knowing that this time will pass and I really want to spend time with them. Since I got pregnant with Lucas, my mindset shifted from having career as my North Star to something else. And Lucas is now almost 3 years old, and I'm still becoming that person who is his mom. And he needs to use the toilet. We need to pause. Okay. That was very real as I was answering that question. So,
No worries. Take your time.
I feel like I'm just barely surviving with everything, trying to stay healthy and work out and drink water and work full time and like have 2 kids and spend time with them. Since I got pregnant with Lucas, my mindset has shifted, and I went from being this like career is my North Star, very, very career focused and oriented, to figuring out there's something that for the first time matters more than myself, matters more than my life, matters more than the entire world. And that was a crazy shift that I'm still going through and evolving. But as of now, I feel like I am 95% into this new version of myself of becoming a mother. And it took me a little bit to get here. But right now, it all starts with career. Everything I do is to enable a good life for them and for future generations. This is the realest part of the meeting, though, because I have a toddler in front of me playing. And like, I'm trying to explain, I'm watching my baby in the baby camera, like as she sleeps. But so I started as an entrepreneur. The first thing I did when I was pregnant was trying to find alternative ways to work. So I figured I wanted to start like a co-working space with daycare attached. But at the same time, I didn't feel ready to start a business while pregnant and having a baby. And then I got pregnant again. So I've been like cooking alternative ways to help mothers like me and fathers live a career fulfilling life, because career and mission still matter for me, while also not neglecting this precious time when they're so young and so creative. So to the very least, I've been revamping the way I work. I've been working fractionally. I've been finding ways to work for companies that are more aligned with my mission, and I've been more efficient in terms of I have 4 or 5 hours of solid focused work a day. And sometimes not even that, because Lucas was supposed to be at like a very cool daycare we found for him today, and the heater broke. So I have to juggle and figure out how to do things. So we become very efficient, very creative, very resilient, very focused. And I have learned to work in ways that work serves my life and my family and not dominates my life. And it should be the opposite. And if anything, I've started to work smarter. And I'm still trying to figure out solutions for parents to make the most of their careers while making the most of life with little ones and staying healthy. And I've always been curious about early childhood education. I've always been curious about new ways of work. The company I built back in Malaysia was around new ways of working, like working flexibly and remote and workspaces that
Mm-hmm.
served you. So the bottom line is I am currently cooking how to make the world better for families, more integrated. And I've run through several projects in this journey. I started listing like a marketplace for places to go and do things with your kids in New York City. Then I moved out of New
Mm.
York. I started Left and North, which is like I'm still
Yep.
running it. And it's a journey, memoir, creative writing, stream of consciousness based journey, mostly for women to reinvent themselves through writing after going through big transitions, mainly
Hmm.
motherhood.
Yep.
And I'm doing that for myself. I'm making sense of like who I was and who I've become. The word here is identity shift. The
Mm-hmm.
term is more than the word. The term is identity shift. And I feel that like going through this identity shift might take years. For me, I'm still going through it from being this like nomad, cosmopolitan, cool chick, like who lived all over the world, to becoming a grounded mother in New Jersey. And it's a very big shock for me. That, if anything,
Yeah.
is my biggest cultural shock. But at the same time, I'm living for my biggest purpose in life yet. And I chose this. I love having Lucas just running around and causing chaos and havoc as we have this podcast. And everything I do more than ever is for the future generations now. It's for him, it's for Noah, and it makes me work more efficiently. It makes me smarter. So it's
Right.
tough, but I really respect parents now more than ever.
Right.
I have so many people who I think are doing this better than me, who I strongly admire. And I'm still trying to figure out what are the best ways for us to have it all. I still don't know the answer.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of mothers feel very similarly in a way.
Yeah.
Did you always want to be a mother?
It's funny. I have to pick up Noah. This is gonna get it more
No worries.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Noah. So
Oh my
say hi.
God. What a
And the thing is
cutie.
here
I
too.
know.
So I've
Terrible.
always I definitely always wanted to be a mother, but not in a way that like I always played with dolls. I've always been interested about like giving, as I said, life experiences have like been my North Star, peak experiences.
Mm.
And after I was always curious about the experience of raising little humans. If anything, I've always wanted to be a grandmother for sure.
Oh, wow.
Funnily
I
enough.
know. Yeah.
I never thought much about being a mother, and I wanted to let it be and let it flow, but I definitely wanted to have the experience of raising little kids. And to be real, I definitely wanted to be a mother. After a certain age, I really wanted to find a partner who was reliable. That was part of me leaving Malaysia. I wanted to be closer to my family in Brazil. Part of it was building a family. So I can say whatever I
Right.
want about, I wanted to be a grandmother, but I've always wanted to be a mom, and I've always wanted to raise kids, and I've always been curious about personal development from a young age, like early childhood development. And now that I've become a mom, I can validate to myself that's the right thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
I find it like a psychedelic experience in the most literal way because it changes your brain. That's the meaning of psychedelic deeply. Like it's mind changing for women more than for men, really. Like it literally
Right.
changes your chemistry. And I think it makes you more empathic, more aware, more world caring, more meaningful, wiser. It just makes me a better version of myself.
I love
And
that.
I love the challenge of still focusing on career and having a role in society. And that's the toughest part. Women are leaving the workforce like crazy right now in the US. The world does not make it easy for mothers to belong. Even like part of my first project was living in New York City while having Lucas as a baby and toddler. I could no longer belong to the same places I used to when I was not a mom. Like going
Right.
to restaurants, going to co-working spaces, to the point I wanted to start this idea of like co-working space with daycare, but I found one in the Upper West Side called Workplace, and big shout out to Michelle, who was the founder of it. And I remember going from North Brooklyn to the West Side, Upper West Side, every day for a month before moving to the suburbs, just to experience that before moving here. And it
Oh,
was
wow.
wonderful.
Yeah.
I love that there's an awareness right now of needs that are not just for women, are for fathers as well, for men with children, for caregivers. There's a bigger awareness right now of our needs, but yet the world is so behind in integrating us. And there's people wanting areas of trains and flights without children. And maybe I used to be one of them. And thank goodness I'm no longer that narrow minded that like
Hmm.
I get annoyed at a kid crying in the plane. I think I was actually 24 when I realized for the first time that like I shouldn't be annoyed at babies in the plane. Their mothers are doing their best. So I was doing better than most at an early age. But I
Yeah.
remember like as well as a young adult, maybe it bothered me to have like kids yelling around because that's the culture we're in. I don't blame people who are annoyed at kids in public spaces. We are sort of conditioned to be annoyed at these little ones.
Hmm.
Yet society needs these little people to thrive, to progress. And yet we live in a world that, especially in the US, tries to compartmentalize children to have their spaces and not bother the adults. And
Right.
places like Scandinavia tend to have more integrated lifestyles where family life is integrated with usual daily life in the
Hmm.
smallest ways, accessibility, strollers, and children's play spaces in trains and etc. So I feel that we have a long way to go in terms of integration, not only in the US, in Brazil as well, many places in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that part of my life right now is doing everything with kids, even this
Mm.
podcast. It was
Yeah.
not the plan, as you know, but it's
Yeah.
doable. And
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
feel that we have to be more inclusive of families, mothers, fathers who are literally like pushing the economy forward by having kids. So that's my argument, though. I'm a mom. This is my very, very personal perspective on it. And I feel that in terms of environmental concerns, I think I'm raising kids who will help Earth and who will help the world become a better place. That's a big part of why I wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
It's been the best and right for me.
Hmm.
And
I love
that's
that.
what matters.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You inspire me too. I want to finish with one last question. Like, considering how the state of the world, how isolated we are more and more, what would you say that we need to think about first when building our own communities for someone that doesn't know where to start?
So I think the realest answer I can give, yes. And it's funny because, yes, I'm a community builder. I wrote a book about it. But when it comes to building communities of one's own, it's always hard. I moved to the suburbs like a year and a half ago, and I'm still working on making friends. Being
Hmm.
a community builder doesn't make me any more prepared to live in this isolated world than anyone else. But what it does give me is like insights on just try to hack things and make it quicker. But the bottom line is that I feel the best way to belong to communities is definitely by finding communities to belong to first. I wrote about this in my book that building communities from scratch is like moving to a new city, metaphorically,
Hmm.
where you don't know anybody and trying to host an apartment party. Nobody's
Hmm.
gonna come. The first thing you gotta do when you move to like, let's say you move to New York for a very rich example. If you're into jazz, you likely just go to jazz clubs. If you like
Right.
poetry, go to poetry readings. If you like dance, go dance. If you like, I find that belonging to communities that are meaningful for you and supporting those local communities is the first step to building yourself a strong community. And that has become very real for me because being a community builder, I did try to hack my way and start a community to attract people, but I found it to be very hard. Almost against my advice, I tried to start a community from scratch after just moving to the suburbs, like literally. And it was hilarious because
Hmm.
it failed. And I knew that, but I just kind of trusted myself too much. And it was great to see it failing because what I've been doing for the past year is like I've been going to yoga with the baby. I signed up for a daycare that is like a local co op and has higher involvement of parents and a little community. I found a group of moms who are homeschoolers and they accepted me into their group, into their pack. I found a space similar to the one I mentioned in New York for like a membership club for babies and grown ups and babies, kids in general, babies, toddlers, grown ups. And I'm supporting a local business owner, but I'm also finding community. And I think part of building a community is knowing who you are. And as a new mother or as someone new into a city, you often are under construction. So I think working on yourself first by trying different things,
Right.
back to the just move to the city net metaphor, go to an Irish pub and go often, go recurrently. One visit won't build community, won't make friendships, but recurring interactions will. So if
Yeah.
you go yoga, go to yoga twice a week. Frequency. Find the places that feel like home to you. And after maybe you live enough through this, you'll make some friends, and you have a compilation of spaces that will make you start. I'm gonna make it up right now. A jazz club that also has maybe a piano bar, a wine bar, and a little area for kids to play. I don't know why I'm involving
Yeah.
alcohol here. I'm just making this example as I go.
No, I love it.
You are the only one who can build a community that really looks like you. But even for myself right now, I'm under construction. I just had a baby. I just moved into the suburbs. While I'm still working on myself, I'm joining other people's communities. I'm supporting them. And in those communities, I'm making friends one at a time, slowly. I'm supporting my neighbors too. I'm trying to engage in neighborhood activities and events. That's very important. So engaging in your local community, buying from local businesses, consuming locally, making friends first is very important for you to even gain clarity on what you'd like
Right.
to build and what's missing. It's like doing
Mhm.
market research.
Yeah.
Every community, even if you have a very clear idea, like I want to start a craft club for moms, this is the community I want to start. Give an example. Maybe you want to do a little bit of community mapping first. Maybe you want to do a little bit of local research. And maybe you want to do a little bit of like joining workshops. It says, oh, there's no craft clubs here, but maybe there are workshops. Go find people who like crafts like you first. So the first step to building community, I think, is being out there and belonging to communities and
Yeah.
supporting them. And that's also what I call respecting the locals or respecting the elders, which is
Mhm.
a surfer-ish kind of metaphor. Like when you are in a new surf break, respecting the locals is a good idea. They know more about the area. Watching them help, like understanding the silent rules of the game. And then that will help you also land into who you are before you start a community. And if you have already been doing all the above, you've already been going to events, activities, your favorite spots, and you already know there is something that you want to start, and you have a core group of people who would be like on board with you, you're ready. Just
Yeah.
start creating recurring excuses to bring them together, which is essentially what builds the community.
Yeah. And be
It's just really
curious. Be curious about other people and their
Yes.
stories.
In fact, I want to wrap with this that I thought I would mention and I didn't. But I have a whole subchapter in my book called Be the Foreigner. I think that the very
Mhm.
first step to building a community, even if you are not going anywhere, you haven't moved, you've been in your neighborhood for years and you're still there, but thinking like the foreigner is a key step to building a community. And that's exactly what it
Yeah.
means. Like explore your area like you've never been here. Be curious about what
Absolutely.
others are doing. Support them. Ask people questions. Don't assume who they are. Maybe your neighbor that you've always known for just driving that specific car, deep down has been writing poetry, like closed in their bedroom, and you don't know, and you want to start a writing club. You never know about people who you maybe just interact on the surface with.
Yeah.
Look for like the tiniest simple excuses to bring people together. But first and foremost, having that foreigner attitude of like, I'm just going to be curious about people and
Yeah.
about what they need. And I think that's the very first step.
Absolutely. Asking questions. Many. How can people reach out to you, Liz, if they wanted to?
Yeah, I think as much as I have not been abiding by LinkedIn's algorithm, I think I'm fairly responsive there. If you DM me on
Yes.
LinkedIn, I've been trying to steer away from social media, or I do not mind if you share my email privately with people. You have my email and my hacking community's email. But I think LinkedIn is a good starter. Once again, I've been like very inactive there in terms of sharing content, which I used to do more often, but it's the best of the worst right now.
Yeah. We'll share it here.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Liz, for all
Thank
your
you.
time. I'm
I
learning
hope
so
it
much
was
from
not
you.
I hope you can handle all the
No worries. That's what makes it interesting and real. So thank you. I
sounds
really
good.
appreciate
Well,
that.
thank you for your patience again and for
Of
being game to
course.
doing this in this situation.
Absolutely. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much,
Have a
Mariana.
good
See
day.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
There is something very powerful about what Lai shared today, that being a foreigner is not just about the passport you hold, but about the curiosity you bring to your own neighborhood and your own identity shifts. I hope Lies reminds you that you don't have to have it all figured out to start building your own community. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is be curious and be consistent about it. You can find Lies' information and the link to her book, Hacking Communities, through the links in the show notes. And if this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend who might need a little more growth and gentleness in their life right now. I'm Mariana, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye, everyone.